Howdy! Today I'm going to show you how I made some abstract art. This piece was inspired by the work of Fromoseed. He is an awesome turner, power carver, and artist. And if you haven't seen his work, you should definitely check it out. So let's get started. After gluing up a panel of some scrap knotty alder that I had lying around, I traced out a rough shape of what I wanted it to look like, and then I used my Diablo hole saw to cut a starter hole in the wood. And since I don't have a bandsaw, I'm going to be using my reciprocating saw to cut these curves. But I'm not going to be using just any old blade. I'm going to be using a blade from Diablo. It's their new roughen scrolling carbide reciprocating saw blade. And it should help me cut those circles and radiuses. I don't use this saw very much, and so it took me a second to get the hang of it. Plus my workbench was a little light, so it did end up pushing it around. But overall, it cut through this way better than I thought it would. Ta-da! I cut out a ring. I was so happy to make it to this point, but was still a little worried on where this project was going to take me. But once that was cut out, I drew a line that was roughly 2 inches wide that matched the inside. This was going to act as my guide for the outside of the ring. And then I cut it the same way as the inside. And I was left with this abstract ring of art. Now it was time for sanding, and boy was there a lot of sanding. I used my belt sander for most of the outside. I tried little sanding tips on my Dremel. I used my sanding sleeves from Sabertooth. I used my micro zip from Gator. I used reusable sanding blocks. I used my orbital sander. Basically, I used every sanding thing I own. Not fun, but in the end, I'm happy with the smooth result. Plus, I really like how these clamps help me hold the piece upright so I could make sanding just a little bit easier. I also water popped the grain. It just lifts the grain a little bit, sanded it down again, and just gives you an even smoother surface. And then I rounded over the edges with the round over bit on my router. And then I admired my work. I was like, whew, we made it this far. I had to stop, step back, and take a look. But not for long, because this project is not done. Now's time for the fun part, adding texture. I tested out several different burrs and decided to go with Old Faithful and my favorite 3/8" sphere burr. But before I did that, I drew a guideline in about 1/4 inch. I only wanted the texture to be on the outside of the frame. And then I started by adding the texture to the outside line and then the inside line and then filled it in. And the sphere burr gave it a hammered textured look to the piece. That looked really cool. Then I decided to help make the texture stand out, I wanted to paint it white. So I taped off as much of the piece as I could and then used some white spray paint. I did have a little overspray, but that easily got cleaned up by sanding it off. Just be sure that the textured sections are lower than the edges if you're going to sand over the whole section with your orbital like I did. Mine weren't, so I ended up having to carve it a little lower and repaint it. So either carve it lower to begin with or just hand sand the excess off the edges and you'll be fine. And the last thing to do was to add some finish to the piece. I decided to use clear wax. I figured it'd be the best thing not to yellow the white paint. Plus it was super easy to apply. Wipe on, wait about 30 minutes, and then buff it off. And just like that, I have some awesome abstract art. I'm still searching where I want to put this in my house. If I end up hanging it on the wall, I'll cut a keyhole in the back so the piece will lay flat against the wall. Or I might add a stand to the bottom so that it can set on a shelf. But either way, it's going to add so much character and texture to whatever space it ends up in. So what do you think? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're there, please make sure that you're subscribed to my channel for more awesome DIY projects. Remember, build loud, build wild, and have an awesome day.